one that is funny, but yet it's not so funny. And it was aboard the second ship. It was a destroyer escort. And I was the engineering department head now aboard this ship. And we were sailing, we were going from our home port to Hawaii one time. And we were about 2 days outside of Hawaii, and we were doing depth charge exercises where you drop depth charges to like try to hit submarines, the enemy submarines. Well, one of the depth charges went off prematurely and it blew a hole in the bottom of our ship. And as I said, fortunately, I had damage control background. And so I knew how to get mattresses and 2x4s and 4x4s and everything down in the engine room to get that hole patched. And we then limped on into Pearl Harbor where we had to have it fixed. And we were the joke of the shipyard. You guys blew a hole in the bottom of your own ship?
See, there might be a pattern here. He left the island and then he blew up the ship.
You were in charge of damage control.
Oh, yeah. It was a good thing I was.
Yeah.
Good thing I knew how to do it. I knew how to fix the ship, at least until we could get into port. Did you ever visit a place that completely surprised you, and what was it like? And yes, it surprised me in a couple different ways at a couple different times. And the place I'm referring to is Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay. When I visited Gitmo in 1957, it was a beautiful place, beautiful. All the cars were brand new. They're the same cars that are there today. It shows you what a communist dictatorship will do. It did not expand at all. The communist dictatorship kept that whole economy suppressed. People still drive cars from the 50s, just like they had when I was there in the 50s. It was in 1962, I think it was, the president of the Soviet Union. He thought that he would expand into this hemisphere where he was putting missiles into Cuba. John Kennedy was president at the time, and Kennedy told him, "You're not going to do that. You're going to have to take those missiles out, or we're going to take them out." Well, my very best friend in college was a Navy pilot. He has since passed away. He was a Navy pilot flying attack bombers. And he told me later on, when this was all over, all I knew was we aboard the ship that I was on, that destroyer escort, we had to go to top level of readiness. They didn't tell us why, but we had to go to, they have different words for it, DEFCON 5 or 3 or whatever. whatever it was back then, the highest level of readiness, but they didn't tell us why. Well, I later on learned why. My buddy, Dave, he was on the deck of that carrier, fully loaded with bombs. He was on the launching pad of that carrier, ready to take off and go bomb those missile sites. Peace through strength. John Kennedy said, I'm going to take you out if you don't remove those missiles. And he would have done it. The decks were teak, so they were all wood, a hardwood. And of course, they would get covered in salt water all the time with salt water splashing up on the decks. And so in order to keep the decks in tip-top shape, you have to clean them. And you use the process of holy stoning. And holy stoning is you get a block that's about that big, and it's got a hole in the middle. And the hole doesn't go all the way through. It's just big enough for a stick to go down in that hole. And you then line up about 5 or 6 of you in a row, and they play a song, and I forget what the song is, and you go back and forth, and this pumice stone is scraping that teak deck and scouring the salt that had been deposited on it when the saltwater spray hits the deck. And we would have to do that once a week. And we would go around that top deck once a week doing that thing with holy stoning. And we would do it in unison. So when I went this way, my buddy right next to me would go that way also, and then we would come back this way, and we would do it so many times, our strokes would overlap, so we would get everything. We would do it like 10 times, and then we would shift to the next board and go back and forth, 10 times, then shift to the next one, back and forth. And it was really a neat exercise. How did life aboard the ship shape the way you see the world? Let me tell you another story. This goes back aboard the ammunition ship now. And we were still in the Western Pacific. We had a fire alarm go off in our number 2 hold. Now aboard this ammunition ship, there were 5 holds. Number 2 hold contained our nuclear weapons. I happened to be up in the bow when this alarm went off. And so immediately I went to number 2 hold to see what that was about. But on my way there, there's this one sailor running towards the stern of the ship. And I knew all the sailors aboard ship and where their damage control stations were. And I called out his name. I said, "Where you going, Anderson? Get back to your duty station." He was running away from me. He said, "It's a fire in number 2 hold, sir. I said, get back to your duty station. So he turned around and went back to his damage control party where he was supposed to be. Well, it was just a small fire and no big damage. But it illustrates the point. Everybody had to depend upon everybody else. You're at sea, miles and miles away from everybody else. And if everybody's not doing their job, you could very well sink that ship. And that young man, being scared, running away from the fire, thinking that the fire is going to be worse because it's where the nuclear weapons are. He was just a young sailor. He just didn't know. But it's like everybody has to depend upon themselves, just like aboard this planet, we all have to depend upon each other and learn to live together.
Remember, fighting a fire aboard ship is a complicated operation, involving the teamwork and efficiency of all shipboard personnel. Fire is your enemy. Learn your firefighting duties so that when fire strikes, you will be prepared to fight it promptly and efficiently to protect your shipmates and your ship.
The Hornet was equally or more so famous than the Boston. The Hornet was a series of ships were named the USS Hornet. Very famous ships in World War II. And
This is what they gave him. Is that the right one?
yeah, that's it. And I was aboard this ship, the Hornet, CVS 12. And that's the summer of, let's see, 59. This is where I caught the Hornet in Yokosuka, Japan. I flew over there after my junior year in college. I then went for a 2-month cruise aboard the Hornet here. We used to go in and out of Yokosuka quite a bit. And there was this bar that we would go to. It was right near the pier. And all of us midshipmen that were of age or close to being of age, they never checked your ID in Japan. And so we'd go over there and have a few beers that night. And we got to know the mama-san. She was the owner of the bar. And one night we stayed after closing hours. There were probably, I think, maybe 3 of us. We stayed after closing hours, and we got her to start talking about her past. Well, it turns out that her parents lived in Hiroshima. And she had a very strong opinion against us Americans. You would never know it though. She was the owner of the bar, and she welcomed us in there whenever we came in. she never made her feelings known until this one night when we got her talking. And she was very distraught because her parents lived at Hiroshima and they were killed. Another interesting thing on this cruise here, the Hornet pulled into Hong Kong. This would have been in the summer of '59. We pulled into Hong Kong, and I had always heard that you could get really good custom-made suits in Hong Kong. And so sure enough, we pulled in, we anchored, and all these little boats came around the aircraft carrier, and they were shooting their cards up landing on the carrier deck. Cards of business, you know. And I found one that was a tailor. And so I went to that tailor and I had a suit made. Well, interesting thing is, probably about a month later, the cruise was finished. I flew back to San Francisco, and my twin brother George, who was also on that cruise, but on a different ship, he came in later, on a destroyer, if I remember. He and I got a motel room before we headed out the next morning. And so I opened up my suitcase and I said, let me show you what I got. And I showed him this suit that I had bought while I was in Hong Kong. I was really proud of it. And he said, I got one just like it. I said, you got one just like it? Where did you get it? It turns out he went to the same tailor. What are the odds? There's 100 tailors at least in the city of Hong Kong. This is the summer of '59, so I'm 3 years out of high school, okay? I graduated from high school in '56. And I'm walking down the street with a couple of my shipmate buddies, and there's this guy and a couple other guys coming towards us, and we passed each other, and all of a sudden, this one guy in the group that just passed turned around, and I turned around, and I said, Nelson Zucchetto. And he said, Bob Syring. We went to high school together. And here we met in Hong Kong. He was there from a different ship.